Better or worse?
Looks the same.
Oh, no, I meant the
All right,
audio.
Sam, let's just start us. Hello, everyone, and welcome to June PDN Live. It is your moderator, Shannon, and I have Rob with me as well. Apologies for the delay. We both had, I had a technical difficulty. Rob, as you can see, is literally on the road. So, hey, Rob, how's it going?
Well, I'm on the side of the road now, technically, so I'm in a parking lot. But yeah, which is good. We've never done a tour time live actually from a vehicle, so
It is. So, where are you?
this is good. Pueblo, Colorado. Headed back up to the Western headquarters in Denver, and then classes in Denver Monday, Tuesday, or not in Denver, but in Colorado, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday on the tour.
Awesome. And how is the tour going?
It's been going great. I mean, it's just, record classes, and we're running more classes this year than we ever have before. We've got as many instructors. We may even have more instructors than we've had before. We got some guys are out teaching in Arkansas this week. Jamie Onion just ran a course in Iowa, which is kind of cool. We ran our 2-person armed defense courses with Cedar Valley Outfitters, and had the legendary Masad Ayub and Gail Pepin. They were both in the class as students, as a 2-person team, obviously. And that was kind of neat today in Iowa. And I think Caleb Causey is getting ready to do something in Texas. And I'm getting ready to go to Colorado. And I'm going to be out in Milwaukee on Sunday doing an instructor development lecture for a group of female instructors with well-armed women at the USCCA headquarters in Milwaukee, or just outside of Milwaukee. So that's kind of a cool thing for this weekend, an unscheduled tour event we've got that hopefully everyone has seen and read about and watched some of the videos we've done, the alliance between Personal Defense Network and USCCA.
Very cool. You, as usual, are very busy. For those of you joining us, this is one of, backed by popular demand topics tonight, Ask Rob Anything. And we want to thank those that support the PDN Live. So thank you, Springfield Armory. And feel free to ask questions live during this session, because we thrive off of your live questions. So really, no questions are off limits tonight. And if you want to connect with us after the show, you can follow us on Twitter at PD Network, Facebook Personal Defense Network, Instagram PD Network, and then of course you should subscribe to our newsletter. It's free. It's awesome. So Rob, you ready to jump in?
Let's do it.
Okay. What are the top 5 personal defense mistakes that are made from citizens?
That's like 5 questions, isn't it? Top 5 personal defense mistakes. 1, not thinking you need to take care of yourself or be prepared to meet violence, to meet evil, to meet security issues, safety issues, emergency medical issues. I think that's the number 1 thing. Just obviously species wide that we do. I think the number 2 thing is to take very superficial measures that, like, buying a gun, but then never getting training, never practicing, not even having it staged properly or not carrying it properly, and just feeling like now you have this magic talisman that's going to keep you safe or let you, defeat evil. The same thing would be like buying a security system for your house. You buy it, don't use it all the time, or you only get half of your base ground floor windows covered with sensors or something. So you have better than nothing, but it's kind of just a feel-good measure. We talk a lot in the self-defense community about how most gun restrictions and gun-free zones and those kinds of things are just feel-good measures for people that are in denial about the reality of the need for personal defense. Sometimes we do feel-good measures inside of the community as well. So number 1 is denial. Number 2 would be half measures. Number 3 would probably be just isolating your skill practice, like deciding you want to be a martial artist. So you spend, 3 nights a week at the martial arts gym, learning one art and getting really good at it. And, you get your black belt and you get your stripes or you get whatever, and you become a teacher and you become really passionate about unarmed defense or just one martial art. And therefore you think you've got it covered. Obviously for firearms, it's the person that joins the IDPA and starts winning plaques and getting really good at shooting, or does some other type of competitive shooting. And just in part, but not any kind of a comprehensive approach to personal defense or safety or security. So denial measures, isolated measures where you just become a specialist, a hobbyist, if you will, in one area and not being completely well-rounded. And then number 4 would probably be the people that get the training but don't follow through with the practice. So they get the training and they get the knowledge and maybe they practice the skills, they learn the skills, but then they let it go. They don't keep up with it. They don't, something as simple as keeping their firearm maintained, making sure they cycle their ammo every year in their carry gun, their batteries in their flashlights, that kind of stuff. People that take excited about the training, but then don't put the work in. Sometimes the harder part isn't going, we'll go to 4th year, but then they never actually just go to the range and practice their skills, or they go to the gym and find a partner to spar with or to practice their grappling with, and that's a problem. And then the last one would be probably the idea of we talk to a lot, the people that come to Personal Defense Network, people I see on Facebook or that come to our live classes a lot. They worry a lot about the sort of what I would call the fun skills, the hard skills, and when I say hard, I mean versus soft, the fighting skills, the warrior skills, the shooting, the punching, the knife, they get really excited about the gear. And maybe that should probably be in there, maybe number 5, but I think that's related to it, is people get really excited about the gear and they get excited about using the gear, or they get excited about the fighting techniques and practicing those. And they forget about the alarms and locking their doors and carrying a flashlight and kind of all those other things that aren't maybe as cool, but are at least as important, if not more important, in our daily lives.
So recap those 5.
Denial, superficial actions, isolated skills or becoming a hobbyist was in there. Specialization was in there. The gear and the overemphasis on the hard techniques was number 5. And I don't know, what was the other one?
I think you got them all.
Complacency, getting the training and then not practicing. So complacency. So you've got denial is different from the complacency. The denial people never even go get the training. The complacency people get the training, but then never practice. And then in the middle of them, you've got the person that just takes a superficial step. And then after the person that gets the training is the person who just gets the training and practice in one area and becomes a hobbyist. And then the last piece is the person that only worries about the fighting skills or the gear and not, again, that comprehensive, holistic approach.
All 5 of those sound like they can be an individual episode of PDN Live.
Yeah, like I said, it sounded like it was like 5 questions. So maybe that's an article. Maybe that's an article series I'll do. The 5 most common mistakes.
There you go.
Remind me to do that.
So this next one is just a 1-part question. How, as an instructor, do you convince people that fandom about a certain firearm is not as important as their ability to shoot the firearm?
You faded out a little bit at the end of that, but if it was convincing people that one firearm isn't the answer, but the skills are the answer?
Yes, like the people that go crazy over the latest and greatest and think it's the best, but how do you convince them that's not all about the latest and greatest, but actually the ability to shoot that firearm?
All right, interesting question. So it kind of goes back to what we just talked about. The people that buy the gear but then don't go practice, they just get that magic talisman. Obviously, that I guess by the time I talk to most people, that's kind of they've crossed that bridge. By the time somebody shows up in a class, they may have the wrong firearm, and they have to learn through experience why a simpler firearm or a more reliable firearm or a firearm that fits their hand better might be a better choice. But as far as convincing them that they need to do more than just buy the gun, obviously, if they're showing up to a class, they've accepted that. I think that one of the things that I do, and people probably that watch PDN Live every episode have heard this deal before, but a lot of times when I have a big audience, like at an NRA convention or something, I'll have people raise their hands and say, who owns guns primarily for personal defense? And of course, a lot of people raise their hands. I'll say, okay, keep your hands in the air if you have more than 5 guns. And then I'll say, okay, keep your hands in the air if you have more than 5 guns and you've never taken a defensive firearms training class that you didn't need to take for a job or to get a concealed carry permit or something. And of course, then some hands will go down, but there'll still be a lot of people with hands in the air. And that's sort of a, confrontational moment for them in their own brains. Cause I'll tell them, I'll say, well, you're lying to yourself. Because if you have a gun collection, begin training, and you tell yourself you own guns for personal defense, you're probably lying to yourself and your family and anybody else that's going to care about you taking protective measures for them with those guns, because 20 guns isn't hacking people. It's having a few guns, maybe, or at least one gun, and then go and get the skills. So that goes back to that question.
Okay. So another live question came in. What kind of tactics and or weapons would you suggest for someone with a disability and or elderly?
Well, it depends. Let me answer that question. We get a lot of questions about how do you train the problem disability training for the, so isn't a description of anything except like chronological age. I don't even know where we consider elderly now. I mean, if somebody calls me up and says, hey, I'm elderly, can I take your class? I'm going to assume that they're definitely over 60. Probably for me, if I would think I'm not going to call anybody elderly until they get over 70 anyway. So all I really know about them now is that they're older. So if they're older, but they're fit, if they're older and they're limber, if they're older and they're strong, and it doesn't have to be strong for someone their age, just if they have enough hand strength and they have the dexterity, the flexibility, and the range of motion, then they're going to shoot just like anybody else. So being elderly doesn't necessarily mean that you're in some category of, oh, you have to take this special class. If anything, sometimes the way you live and the way you move and what you pay attention to and how much attention you pay to things, that becomes more of an issue when you're obviously older in appearance, because different types of people might target you thinking you're not prepared to defend yourself. So there's security things that there were security tips and behaviors that I would give to someone who was in advanced age and elderly, chronologically elderly. They speak to their physical condition. Having said that, talking about physical disabilities, on what the physical disability is. If the physical disability is related, then there's going to be different tips that I give for somebody who's mobility challenged, somebody who's got one arm or is missing digits or a hand or something like that, doesn't have the use of both hands, is going to get different advice, digits they're missing, or how many digits they're missing, or if they have only one arm, or they have an arm and a stump, or they have an arm and two fingers, or, I don't know what they have. So it is impossible, I believe, to tell someone answer is because they are quote unquote disabled. What I tell people is, I don't care what your disability is, show up to a class. And I've trained someone in, probably like you, whether it's range of motion, flexibility, missing digits, missing limbs, mobility issues, in a wheelchair, artificial limbs, vision, really bad vision, legally blind level vision problems. So show up, if you're ready to do the work. I actually had someone approach me about trying to do a special program for disabled shooters. And I told her, and I put her in touch with shooters that we've had in our classes to let them sort of speak to how I approach it and the efficacy of it. I don't want 12 people showing up, each with a unique individual disability on one day. I mean, if they did, great, but I'm not going to set up a class that way, because what would happen if I set that class up, I'm going to have 12 different very special potential problems that I have to deal with as an instructor. Whereas if we said, okay, wheelchair day is June 31st, well, the chances of finding enough people in wheelchairs that can get to a certain range on June 31st and are interested in the training, that's slim and none. It's hard enough to fill a women's only course, just finding, women, and women are 51% of the population. So trying to find wheelchair people that want to come train would be hard. So I'd much rather say, any of our classes are open to anyone who wants to show up. And when we get the person that shows up in a wheelchair, we get the person who shows up with an artificial limb, or we get the person with any other deficiency or disability, we just work them into the class. And it's always been relatively easy to figure out the way to help that one person with special, considerations or special techniques or gear or whatever, amidst the 8, 10, 11 other people that are there doing it kind of quote unquote normally. as opposed to a special day where we pretend that just being disabled means one thing. It doesn't. It's, you know, any group of 12 people is going to have different challenges if they're quote unquote able-bodied. So a disabled person is just another unique individual on the line. And I think a lot of people overthink it, or they worry that if they come to a class, they're not going to be welcome. But that may be true for other instructors. I know it's true for other instructors. It's not going to be true for anybody, you know, teaching under ICE's banner. And I'm pretty sure we can extend that to anybody associated with the personal defense network as well. Now that we do have specific at Personal Defense Network people who especially have mobility issues or other disabilities. They can find information on, you know, running a gun one-handed, or some of the special considerations for shooting from a wheelchair, things like that, are available through both a DVD that we have at the IC training store and some video clips and articles at personaldefensenetwork.com.
So you mentioned that class that might, you know, that wouldn't happen on June 31st because you couldn't get enough people together. It wouldn't happen because there's only 30 days in June. Just I'd let you know.
Busted. This is what I'm looking for 8 days a week over here. I was going to add a day, sneak it in, just because it's a busy year.
All right, next question. What weapon do you recommend for a small framed female without much hand strength?
I would recommend, one thing I would recommend everybody do is go check out the Springfield XDs, the Smith & Wesson M&Ps, and the Glock 9mm, all in 9mm. Check out those guns. They all offer single stack versions as well as double stack versions. Fooled into thinking that the single stack version is automatically going to be easier because it's got a smaller grip. Sometimes having more to hold on to makes a gun easier to shoot. Generally speaking, no, she didn't say anything about hand size. She said hand strength and small frame. Assuming that also means hand size is small, the XD Mod 2, those three that fits the smallest hands the best, and the Glock tends to be the one that fits the smallest hands the worst, with the M&P right in the middle. So that would be my first, you know, advice is go try those guns. If hand strength issues or the hand size issues don't accommodate those guns, there might be some special considerations, but it's very, very rare that one of those guns doesn't work. It's usually technique, technique as far as the grip, or technique as far as the way you're trying to manipulate the gun or run the slide. Those things are usually what hold people up when they have smaller hands, or they have less upper body strength or less grip strength. Combine bad technique, which I see far too often, and now you'll come back to me and say, oh, those guns didn't work for me. Try to find a defensive firearms coach maybe in your area, or somebody else affiliated with the CFS program or Personal Defense Network, to take you to the range or meet you at a range and make sure you're doing the right technique and that you're finding a gun that fits your hand properly. And we have a distance education class on choosing a defensive firearm at Personal Defense Network that might be, you know, a great place to start also, because it'll explain why those three guns are where I usually suggest everybody starts. And it'll also help with those technique and fit issues, regardless of your size. That's kind of there as a resource for everybody. I think it's like $30, and it's a as thorough a presentation as I'm aware of existing for people that are interested in getting a formal education on choosing a defensive handgun.
What other distant education classes are available?
We've got the 3 counter ambush modules, which are all about, I always say it's like the why we teach what we teach and why we do things the way we do on the range, our methodology. That was instructor development level information in the past that I wrote a book in 2012, and we published it in 2013. And we refreshed all that video information and the core courses and the downloads, the PDFs that people will get with that video if they take the distance education modules in 2015. So that's a fresh look at the counter ambush material from 2012. We've got 3 of those. We've got choosing a defensive handgun, defensive shooting fundamentals, kind of going over all the key points of grip and stance and things like that. Then we've got interactions with law enforcement while armed. So, you know, you get a traffic stop and you have to interact with law enforcement while you're carrying a gun. I think that's probably one of the most important ones we have. Of course, a lot of people are talking about Philando Castile shooting in Minnesota because the officer was acquitted late last week on that shooting, which a lot of people see a lot of problems with. And when I posted actually the latest blog at Personal Defense Network has my thoughts on the lessons that we, both on the law enforcement side and on the concealed carry side, can learn that shooting and from the facts of the case. But that's addressed in great detail in interaction with law enforcement while armed. And then Caleb Causey did a very thorough trauma medicine, emergency medicine class. So I think that's called self-defense medicine is the way it's listed in the shop at personaldefensenetwork.com. And that's a great primer on how to use a tourniquet, how to use a pressure dressing, how to use chest seals, how to use hemostatic agents, and how to pack a wound with gauze, things like that. The kind of emergency things that if you're carrying a gun for defense, the kinds of things that are the injuries that you're thinking about having to deal with if someone attacks you or someone you care about. And if you're carrying medical equipment, then this is the class that you need. And again, for $30, $32, and 6 to 8 hours of your time, if you don't know how to use those things, and especially if you've done the magic talisman thing where you've bought this stuff, but you don't know how to use it, you've never taken a formal class in it, that online class is like the next thing you should do. If you've got the equipment or you're curious about how to treat gunshot wounds and puncture wounds and things like that, take the class.
And you can probably stay up to date on all those distant educational classes as well as the schedule for the Personal Defense Network tour if you subscribe to the newsletter. There should be a link for you to subscribe during this live session. It's free and you can find out all sorts of great information. For those of you that are just joining us, we are doing, by popular demand, Ask Rob Pincus anything about personal defense. And we've been answering nothing but live questions, so keep those coming in. We will get around to them as quickly as possible during this. So with that said,
well, let me
Rob,
say before you
match
before you go to next, let me also say that we have now the premium level of membership, which is the entry level kind of paid tier for extra access to our videos and other information, streaming DVDs, things like that we've been doing for years. We also now recently opened up the gold level of membership, and we've got the kind of private access discussion forum. We do special events for the gold members. But one of the other things that comes with gold membership is a discount for all those distance education courses and a couple of free extra downloads. And I think there's 1 or 2 free classes being offered right now with your gold membership. So if you're interested in these distance education classes, you're interested in getting more of the PDN Live kind of interactive things like we're doing right now, the gold level of Personal Defense Network membership is something you should look into at the website.
Yes, and speaking of gold membership, you actually get advance notice of these live sessions, and you can put in your questions ahead of time. And actually, we have a gold member, Jeff, who submitted a question, and he asked, looking for the perfect concealed carry weapon with the right ammunition. And he's a 1911 freak and a big fan of the 9mm cartridge, but looking for some good advice. Currently carrying a Sig Sauer P938. So what are your thoughts on that?
All right, I will say, and people who follow the social media know this, if I can't get this guy, if I can't get you into a modern striker fired gun, the 4-inch EMP from Springfield is a purpose-built gun for the 9mm cartridge on the 1911 style frame, but the EMP stands for evolved. It's not a 1911 per se, and it's not a scaled down 45 caliber 1911. It really is its own thing. So if you're into that kind of thing, the EMP is the place you should be. And I've seen them get through classes. They're one of the few guns that have gotten through classes on that 1911 single action design without just failing miserably. We have a lot of people that have trouble with that SIG because of the way the safety is on there. It's a very small gun. It's very hard to use that safety well. And it's a reliable gun, but the safety able to be used very reliably by people presenting the firearm under stress in a dynamic environment, kind of like we do in our figure 8 drills, things like that. So that's what I would say. Now, which was just a caveat to your I'm a 1911 freak, the answer is modern striker fired gun. Go look at those same guns I mentioned earlier. Look at the Springfield, look at the M&P, and look at the Glock, and figure out which one fits your hand best. Of course, the Avidity Arms PD10 that we're getting closer and closer to releasing is a single stack, full-size gun. So it's got a full-size grip, and it's actually built around a 10-round 9mm magazine. And once we get that out to market, hopefully it'll prove itself reliable enough in enough people's hands very quickly that I'll be able to recommend you take a look at it also, especially because you like the 1911 size grip. And that's really very much what this will have, a low bore axis, modern striker fired gun that feels probably more like a single stack Browning high power, but gives you that slim feel.
Very nice. So he also asked about 9mm, and this kind of hybrids into another question that we got. And, they say 9mm is a good, as good round as any. But if an assailant is high or doesn't care that they're getting shot, wouldn't a 45 stop them faster?
It could, but probably not, because we're not. The difference between the 45 and the 9 is a potential, not for what I would say is not for the reasons being asked, right? So there's no greater psychologically compelling factor from the larger 40 or the 45 versus the 9. So if someone is fighting until they are stopped, I would rather put more holes in them time than slightly larger. The difference, depth of penetration. What we're talking about is what you're hitting with that round that goes through the body. So if the 40 caliber is 1mm thicker in diameter, and then when you expand, you go from 9 to 10mm not expanded, and then when it expands, the 40 caliber might be 1.0 wider, 9mm is 1.0 or so. That extra diameter, increasing the value of that bullet hole as much as a whole nother 9, it's going to be 10mm plus once it expands. So I'd much rather shoot 4 or 5 9mm rounds into somebody than I would 3 40 or 45. Right? So that's the idea. The 9mm has less recoil. You can shoot it faster. You have a higher capacity firearm, so you can eventually put more holes for the same size package into a person or multiple threats and be without reloading. That's what we're looking for. More holes faster, larger hole. So I would say no for the psychological or the physiological reason.
Okay. So we're going to go back to combat focused shooting instructors. John asks, what's the difference between a defensive firearms coach, like your person at the local range, and a combat focused shooting instructor?
From our standpoint, those are kind of like capital letter trademark. The defensive firearms coach is our entry level instructor. That's a 3-day instructor course where people are certified to teach a fundamentals of concealed carry and a fundamentals of home defense class. And those classes not only involve the fundamental shooting aspects, but also some of the tactics and some of the gear issues, choosing a gun, choosing a holster, or choosing a quick access safe or a clandestine staging area, something like that. So we talk about for the home defense, obviously, how to stage a gun and where to stage a gun, where to position yourself, home defense tactics, calling 911, things like that. For the concealed carry, we talk about holsters, carry guns, where to carry, how to carry, when to carry. We talk about, obviously, we teach presentation from a holster for the concealed carry class. We don't necessarily get to that in all of the armed home defense classes. We talk about the immediate aftermath with concealed carry. The tactics are sort of reactionary, right? So you get attacked and you're going to with all your shooting skills. And then we talk about the immediate aftermath, what to do and what not to do in as far as the medical issues, the do you or do you not approach the bad guy issues, and then, of course, what to do when the police show up. And to some extent, maybe some thoughts about what to say when the police show up. That's Defensive Firearms Coach. And that's actually the program that we are now collaborating with the U.S. Concealed Carry Association on. And that was the first course we ran for some of their training counselors from around the country over Memorial Day weekend was a 3-day defensive firearms coach. So we've already USCCA into our program, and now we're working on how that's going to look. Probably about 90 days from now, we're going to launch our first DFC equivalent under the USCCA banner And that'll be a program that now builds on the existing USCCA instructor certification that it presents the lecture information and the classroom stuff and the PowerPoint slides and all that. And this is going to be a live fire program that builds on that base. So we're really excited about that. So that's the DFC. And that's actually a program that's run by Jamie Onion, who is teaching in Iowa today. He manages that program for me under the ICE banner. Now we've got combat focus shooting instructors. That's a 5-day instructor development course that deals solely with intuitive defensive shooting skills, specifically in a counter ambush moment when you get caught off guard. And that could be for law enforcement, or obviously for concealed carry as well. And it's a much more in-depth instructor development program in regard to the range work and the whys and the methodology in terms of our intuitive defensive shooting. You learn a lot more range drills. You learn a lot more on technique and various techniques that then build in handling and applying all these concepts with the carbine class and things like that. So DFC is a comprehensive entry-level defensive shooting instructor course. Combat focus shooting is a very narrowly focused but intense and deep intuitive defensive shooting instructor course.
So say someone's interested in becoming an instructor for either one of those, how do they go about doing that?
The best thing to do would be to take those 3 counter ambush modules I mentioned earlier in the distance education classroom at PDN Academy, and see if that makes sense to you. You take those 3 classes, $30 each. If those resonate and you understand the why in the approach to the way we teach defensive shooting, if you've done that, that's going to set you up really well to take the 3-day defensive firearms coaches program. Certainly you could take the class on defensive shooting fundamentals and defensive firearms defensive handgun selection, because those come right out of the DFC curriculum also. So if you take all those education modules, it's kind of like at the that's really the best path for somebody in the private sector looking to build a business, looking to build their clientele, starting with that fundamental CCW or armed home defense student, and then building them up into the advanced intuitive defensive shooting skill portion through CFS at a later date. For the person who's already an instructor, probably jumping right into CFS is an option, but we have a prerequisite that you must have attended a combat focused shooting course. And again, just get intellectual buy-in to make sure that this really is what you want to do before you show up to the CFS instructor course. And we still recommend that you do the counter ambush material ahead of time as a prerequisite. We've had a lot of, historically, as I've said for a long time, we did our first instructor certification in 2000. We've been doing this for a long time, and for about a decade, we had about a 50% certification rate. Now, people could retest and do all that and eventually get certified, but we had about a 50% success rate during the course. When we started encouraging people to do DFC first, distance education first, we saw those numbers rise dramatically. So someone is a defensive firearms coach and has done the prerequisites that we recommend, there's a like 90+% certification rate at the 5-day CFS ID.
Okay. So next question. Favorite AR accessories for home defense?
Oversized charging handle. But that's kind of for everything, right? I think everybody should get an oversized charging handle, have a good stock, have a good sling. If you're going to put the gun on and then make your phone call or grab your family or lock the doors or look at your smartphone for the camera readout, whatever. Once your barricade door is locked, the good sling is important. So those are all pretty simple, right? So for less than $150, you've got a sling and an oversized charging handle and a good stock if the gun didn't come with those things anyway. So after that, red dot sight is the next thing we would recommend. And inside the house, is that all that important? Probably not. But if you end up outside of your home, or maybe even doing if you end up having to shoot someone who's hiding behind cover down a hallway or down a stairwell, or someone's grabbed a family member and you need to put a shot into their head instead of multiple rounds into their body, that red dot sight might come in handy, especially under low light conditions inside of your house. One of the things that I've really started recommending, and I show people in our carbine classes why, is a laser. So putting a laser aiming module on your home defense AR or your patrol rifle for the guys in law enforcement really can enhance your ability to use the rifle in unorthodox shooting situations where you're injured, you're knocked down, you can't get the gun into a normal shooting position, or in compressed situations where you might not want to bring the gun up to your normal shooting position because someone's charging from inside of a bedroom. They break the door down. They're only 8 feet from you, 10 feet from you. You don't want them grabbing that muzzle as you're shooting that second or third or fourth shot. So pulling the gun back into retention, but having a laser so that you know exactly where that muzzle is still pointed can be a huge advantage. And again, if you get injured and you can't bring the gun up to your face, you're lying on the ground, things like that, but you can still get a hand on the trigger and you can still get that laser onto the threat, that can be very helpful also. So a laser aiming device is something that I've taken about, I don't know, probably the fourth or fifth look at that. An option over shooting positions and using a laser in study is something that especially now with the AR prices coming down so far, as I look around and people either they bought all the ARs they need or they want, and now they're looking to accessorize them. That slightly more expensive accessory is probably a really good investment, especially if you do a light laser combo. I use the Viridian CL5. Viridian also does an XL. They do a remote switch unit. They do a bunch of different things. They're a tour sponsor. There's Streamlight is the one I used to use, the M6, I think, or the M3 with the laser and light integrated together. There's a lot of good ones out there, and that's probably an accessory that I haven't talked about much in the past that I'm starting to recommend more and more.
Well, it's good that you haven't talked about them because we actually have a couple more questions about them from some live viewers. So where should their laser fall in relation to their sights on their firearm?
I mount my laser above the barrel in front of the backup rear sight, and your red dot optic you're gonna see the laser module in that window if you use the types of red dots we recommend, but you're gonna have a clear field of view over it, and your red dot certainly is gonna be significantly above it in your field of view. Then when you pop up that rear sight, the rear sight will be able to clear the top of the laser module, and then to activate it is very close to that backup sight if you're not using a remote. And the other thing, if you have a light and laser combo, that gives you, when you're in your low ready, which is the kind of ready you should use, with a muzzle down in front of you, in front of your feet, is going to be able to be bounced off the floor without casting a shadow from the gun. So on top of the barrel, in front of the backup front sight on a free floated barrel, rail system, but obviously wanting to make sure that the mount and the red dot that you use allow the laser to be beneath.
So what's an efficient distance for zeroing the laser?
Actually, I recommend that you zero your red dot out between 75 and 100 on barrel length and bullet choice and all that. What zero it out point of aim with the red dot on the human head, just beyond 2 arms reach. So that the bullets can run all to be, a quarter of an inch or half an inch high. Gives you one point of aim, and that's all you really need to think of. You don't need to worry about holdovers or a journey. That different type of shooting, primarily the way you do is close zero the laser in those close distances. So 25 yards at the most. If you're doing it for a patrol rifle, if you're inside of or a SWAT guy or something like that, if you're inside of your house for home defense, you might go to 25 feet to zero that laser.
Is a laser with a passive activation in the grip more efficient than one requiring a deliberate activation or deactivation that could be on, say, the rail?
It is more efficient in the sense of there's not an extra step, but some people don't want the laser on all the time. And to turn that light as you're searching for your family member as you through your house, a patrol ride to your building or something like. So the quick access safe, the little magnet guard comes off and it's instantly on, and your battery, you pull it out of your holster and it's instantly on. That's the most efficient. Something on the grip that requires pressure would be the next most easiest way to put it on. But remember, efficiency has to be tied to effectiveness. If your goal isn't to always have the laser and light on, then way to go. And if your goal is not to always have the laser and light on, the pressure switch may not be the best one either, because you're very likely to be exerting a lot of pressure on the grip in an actual defensive shooting situation. So for some people, having a separate switch is the true efficiency model, because their effectiveness, their plan is to not have it on all the time. Mm-hmm. And that's where I fall. So that's why I use the switch out on the rail.
Okay. Question that came in. This one comes in quite a bit. It says, people ask, as long as their weapon is concealed, is it okay to bring it in an establishment that has a no guns allowed sign?
So yeah, no. Private property. If the guy says he doesn't want you in there with a gun, don't take your gun in there. And if it's not a place that you would go to without a gun, then don't go in. Think you don't do anybody any good. It's a very selfish position to say, well, I'm going to go in anyway, because you're not making Earth better. It would make Earth better if you called the guy up, or you went in without a gun and you asked to speak to the owner or the manager. Not the at the counter, but go speak to someone who's a decision maker and say, hey, here's what I think. I'm a law-abiding citizen. I could be legally armed. I'd love to bring my family here, spend time here, spend money here, whatever. But your sign is preventing me from doing that in a way that allows me to for my family. So I'd like for you to change it. And chances are, if enough people did that, those signs would go away. But if you just sneak in, you could very well be violating the law. You're certainly disrespecting someone's private property rights, and you're not making Earth better. You're just being sneaky. So I say no.
So then, what's the most important thing someone can do if they are unarmed and they're out either by themselves or with their family, and an active shooter comes in and starts shooting at random?
Go away. Evade. That's the first thing that we teach people, is to get away, get out, not be where the bad guy is. Move to a place where the bad guy can't hurt you. If you can't do that, then the next step is to barricade, and that means to make it harder for the bad guy to get into a position to hurt you. Block a door, hide behind a counter or something. And then the third thing you do is you respond as appropriate. You fight, improvise tools, swarm somebody. 5 guys tackling a guy is going to make it really hard for him to use a gun to defend himself. We've seen that time and time again. We've seen lots and lots of good guys without guns stop bad guys. And it just takes will, determination, and obviously the more tuned up your head is around what things in your environment can be improvised tools. When we say arm yourself, arming yourself with a gun is quite often a great thing to do, but it's not always even the best thing to do. By arming yourself, your ability to cause physical damage to the bad guy. Right, a guy with like part of my hand or my fist, that's not going to cause as much damage as if I hit him with this edge of this can. Because the edge is going to create more force. It's going to concentrate more force on wherever I'm hitting. The chain has a little, that little concentrates for a hand, or jam that into a person's jawline or their neck or the side of their skull. That's going to concentrate force. I've armed myself. Chain obviously is going to increase my ability to physically hurt somebody. But if you don't have the gun in the public space, I think far too many people think that they're going to be helpless. That's the message sometimes that the gun community spreads, that you need a gun, you're helpless if you go into a gun-free zone, and that's just silly. It's naive, and it's really a very victim mentality. We know empirically that lots and lots of people without firearms have stopped spree killers and mass shooters and all that, and you need to be determined to fight if you have to. The first thing I would do if I'm there with my family is try to get them out.
Mm-hmm. So if you could only become proficient at one thing related to carrying concealed, what would it be?
Avoiding threats. Like it's a hard question to answer, because let's cut to the chase of what I guess the intention is. If you had to learn one skill with a gun, what skill would I teach someone? Well, one of the things we ask in our instructor development course is what would you teach someone if you only had 30 seconds? So here's a loaded gun. You can put it in their hand, and then you've got 30 seconds to teach them before the bad guy comes through the door, 12 feet away. What are you going to teach them? And the skill set that we work on is kinesthetically aligned multiple round strings of fire. Look at the bad guy, drive the gun out to full extension, have a decent grip on the gun, and press the trigger relatively smoothly but quickly, so that you can fire a rapid multiple round fire into the bad guy's torso. That's the skill set that stops the bad guy. So if I could only become proficient at one thing, it would need to be that. Obviously, for concealed carry, if you aren't tying that skill set to rapid presentation from the holster after being caught off guard, then you may never get to use that skill set. But to say presentation from the holster as one skill would be foolish, because I can get the gun out, but if I don't know how to align it and shoot it, then who cares that I got it out, right? I may actually make things worse somehow. So the that it has to be foundational is the rapid multiple round string of fire at 9 to 15 feet, where these events are most likely to be confronted. And if you have to fumble, if you have to take more time on the draw, or you're only going to be able to use the gun when you can stage your grip and get the gun out of your holster, at least then when you're shooting, you're going to be capable of hitting the target. If we only teach you presentation from the holster, you may get the gun out great, but then not have any idea how to manage recoil and put rounds into the ceiling or who knows what. So that's a problem. So really those two things have to go together, but they are two things. The kinesthetically aligned multiple round string of fire and.
Okay. And since this is the Ask Rob Pincus Anything, what's the most common question that you get in your classes that you teach? Is there one question that you always get every time?
It's funny. As an instructor, one of the things you learn is that if students ask the question a lot during the class or in a debrief, for example, you start building that answer into the course, right? So over the years, there have definitely been things that we've added to the course, or that I add to my lectures or my presentations, because they were common questions. It would be kind of silly if an instructor said, "Oh, every single class, at the end of the class, I get this one question." Well, when are you going to figure out that you need to include that in your class, buddy? So a common question that comes up a lot now is, as I get ready to answer it, I get ready to give the answer, I know that there is a sort of self-serving version of this, only because of this collaboration with USCCA. But I do get a question now a lot about the carry insurance, and one of the reasons that I'm excited about the collaboration with USCCA, and one of the reasons that I was ready to pull the trigger, so to speak, on making that formal relationship exist between PDN and myself and USCCA, is because people now they no longer really ask as often, what about this self-defense insurance? Is this a good idea? Or should I make an investment in a plan to help me fund the legal aftermath of a defensive gun use? People now ask which plan they should have. And I've compared it to the red dots on ARs. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, people were asking if they should have a red dot on an AR. Nobody really asks that anymore. Now they ask which red dot they should have. It's just sort of taken for granted. If you're at the level where you're going to show up to one of my defensive rifle classes, you already know you should have one. So you're curious about which type. Should it be the open wind type or the narrow type, solar plant? batteries, it's not, and give an educated answer. So I had to spend more time this year looking at plans that are available to help you prepare. Look at the Armed Citizens Legal Defense Network. And of course, we had Marty Hayes from the Armed Citizens Legal Defense Network on the last PDN Live. We were talking about legal issues. People should go back and watch that one on the legal issues if they're curious about what my recommendation is on self-defense insurance, or just read the blog talking about the collaboration with USCCA. And you'll see some links in there to learn more about the program and why I stand behind it. But, you know, I've had Armed Citizens Legal Defense Network, CCW SAFE, and USCCA for a long period of time, just as being part of the industry. That occurred, right? That's where I ended up going because they're good programs. Now that people are asking a lot of questions about it, I have to be able to recommend something and not just kind of shrug my shoulders and say, well, you know, maybe you need it, maybe you don't. And in 2003, that's what I was saying about red dots on ARs. And that, I would never say that now, as we discussed earlier. It's, yeah, you should have a red dot if you're serious about having an AR for patrol use or for defensive use, you know, outside of a bedroom. A good quality red dot is something you should put on there.
Well, we are at the top of the hour. These hours seem to fly by when we do the Ask Rob Pincus Anything. Want to thank the supporters of the PDN Tour as well as the supporters of this PDN Live. So thank you very much, Springfield. Really appreciate it. Any last parting words, Rob, before we wish everyone a good night?
I think that's the thing. If you haven't seen the video from Tim Schmidt over at USCCA, if you haven't read my blog article at Personal Defense Network, go to personaldefensenetwork.com, click on the blog, read that announcement, take a look at some of the social media posts I've made. It's a big deal. It's really exciting to be aligned with them. They're a very fast-growing organization. They have an amazing call center. If nothing else, one of the things that has blown my mind now that I've been spending time at the headquarters that they built in West Bend, Wisconsin, they have the most educated call center that I am aware of in this industry. They have a whole training program where, you know, if you call the PDN, I'll kind of, you know, out ourselves. You call the PDN help desk. They're there for your logins and for billing questions and membership, you know, what comes with this level, what comes with that level, or to help you with those kinds of things. But they're not going to talk to you about holsters, right? They're going to forward those questions to me and Derek Poole and Grant Cunningham and some of the other subject matter experts that we have to answer those questions for you. The USCCA's helpline is educated on guns and gear and, you know, legal aftermath questions, obviously, because they have the self-defense insurance program. So just the quality of the individual up there and the quality they approach it from Tim Schmidt and all of his leadership team. Steve Fisher that runs the education and training division, who I'm working very closely with, and Jamie Onion's working very closely with on the evolutions for their training instructor program. It's been a lot of fun over the last 6 weeks, 8 weeks, putting all that together, and great things are going to come from it. So that's what I'd say everybody needs to do here in the immediate follow-up is go take a look at my blog article at personaldefensenetwork.com from, I don't know, just after Memorial Day weekend. I think it was June 2nd.
Awesome. And then for those that still have questions after this is over, will you be logging on and checking questions in the comments?
Well, I've got about an hour and a half left to get back to the Western HQ. I may or may not look at them tonight, but I promise I will look at them by Monday morning. How about that?
Fantastic. And thank you everyone for bearing with us with the with my technical difficulties. It's the first time I'm moderating from my phone. I think this is the first time we've had Rob join us from the road, literally.
Literally.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you for spending your Friday night with us, and we will see you all next month in July.